The night had fallen gently, wrapping the world in a cool velvet of shadows and silver light. As I stepped into the moonlit garden, the first thing I noticed was how the air itself seemed enchanted, as if it carried secrets whispered by the stars. The moon, full and luminous, hung above like a patient guardian, casting its soft glow across the path that stretched before me. Each stone of the walkway shimmered faintly, damp with the dew of late evening, and the grass on either side glittered like tiny crystals. The fragrance of jasmine drifted through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of freshly watered soil, creating a perfume no human hand could ever bottle. The garden felt alive, not merely with plants and flowers, but with a spirit, an ancient breath that moved silently between the leaves. The roses leaned slightly toward the path, their petals half open as though they were listening, and the tall lilies seemed to bow their heads in quiet reverence. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sang, its song threading through the silence like golden embroidery upon dark fabric. Each note of the bird's voice seemed to vibrate in my chest, carrying me further into the embrace of the night. I paused for a moment, inhaling deeply, allowing my senses to drink in this world where time seemed to slow, where every detail of nature demanded attention. My heart, weary from the noise and restlessness of the day, began to ease into calmness. I felt as though I had crossed a threshold into another realm, one where the moon had painted everything in its silver ink, transforming even the smallest pebble into something mystical. The garden was not merely a place to walk. It was a place to wander into the soul of the night itself. The path curved slowly, drawing me deeper into the dreamlike haven. With each step, the hush of the world seemed to thicken, as though silence itself had weight and texture here. I became aware of the subtle orchestra that filled the garden. The soft rustle of leaves touched by a midnight breeze, the distant croak of a hidden frog near the pond, and the faint ripple of water where koi stirred beneath the surface. The pond itself was a mirror of the heavens, holding the moon within its glassy embrace. The water lilies, resting atop the still surface, were like celestial blooms fallen from the night sky, glowing faintly as though kissed by starlight. I lingered by the pond's edge, leaning forward to catch the reflection of my own face mingling with the stars. For a fleeting moment, I could not tell whether I was looking at the world above or some secret dimension hidden below. The air was cool against my skin, carrying the perfume of honeysuckle now, sweeter and thicker than the earlier scent of jasmine. A willow tree arched gracefully over the water, its long branches trailing like green fingers in the pond. I felt as though the tree had lived for centuries, watching countless nights unfold, guarding the garden with the patience of stone. Beneath its branches, shadows shifted in ways that made my imagination stir. Were they merely tricks of the light, or was something more alive than I could see? As I stood in quiet wonder, a firefly drifted past, its tiny lantern flickering like a wandering star. Then another appeared and another, until dozens floated through the air, weaving threads of gold between the shadows. I followed them with my eyes, marveling at how even the smallest creatures were part of this midnight symphony. My heart swelled with the quiet recognition that the garden was not just a place of beauty, but a keeper of stories. Every flower, every ripple, every song belonged to a tale older than my own existence. It seemed to welcome me as both a guest and a witness, urging me to walk further into its mystery. And so I did, leaving the pond behind, guided now by the glow of the moon and the delicate dance of fireflies that lit the winding path. As the fireflies drifted further ahead, I followed them like a pilgrim trailing sacred lights. The path began to narrow, framed by hedges of lavender that released their calming fragrance each time the breeze brushed across them. Their soft purple glow under the moonlight created the impression of a river of stars flowing alongside the stone walkway. My footsteps slowed, partly because I wished to savor every moment, and partly because something within me sensed that rushing through the space would be like rushing through a prayer. There was reverence in the air, a solemnity that asked me to tread carefully. I brushed my fingertips against the lavender blossoms, feeling their tiny resilience against my skin, and in doing so I felt strangely connected, not only to plants themselves, but to the entire living orchestra around me. Above, the stars seemed to pulse brighter, as though acknowledging my silent communion with the earth. I came to a small archway carved from entwined branches of two ancient trees that leaned toward each other like eternal lovers. Their trunks were massive, gnarled by time, yet there was tenderness in the way they intertwined, forming an arch that invited travelers to pass beneath. As I stepped through, I felt a subtle change in the air, as if I had crossed from one realm of the garden into another. The silence deepened, but it was not empty. It was filled with listening. I had the sensation of being observed, not by human eyes, but by the garden itself, which seemed to lean in closer the farther I ventured. In the hush, I thought I heard whispers, like threads of voices woven into wind, though I could not discern words. Perhaps they were not words at all, but memories carried in the breath of the night. I paused, standing perfectly still, allowing the sensation to wash over me. Instead of fear, I felt awe. It was as though the garden had a soul, vast and ancient, and I was being invited to wander through the pages of its history, written not in ink, but in petals, branches, and moonlight. When I finally moved forward, the world felt different, closer, denser, and more magical than it had before. Beyond the archway, the path widened into a circular clearing, and at its center stood a fountain carved from pale stone, its surface etched with vines that looked almost alive in the silvery glow. Water trickled from the mouth of a marble swan perched at the top, the sound of the falling droplets breaking the stillness like a soft lullaby. I sat on the fountain's edge, trailing my hand through the cool water. Its touch was smooth, almost silken, carried with the chill of deep earth and the purity of mountain springs. As I stared into the ripples, I noticed how they caught the moonlight and broke into fragments, scattering pieces of silver across the water's face. It reminded me of how moments in life fracture into memories, glimpses of light and shadow that refuse to stay whole. The clearing was surrounded by a ring of tall cypress trees, their dark silhouettes rising like guardians against the night sky. The branches swayed faintly, and with each movement, I thought I glimpsed shapes within them, forms that might have been illusions or might have been echoes of those who once walked here before me. My imagination wandered. Perhaps lovers had once sat here by this fountain, whispering promises into the night. Perhaps poets had drawn words from the trickling water. Perhaps dreamers had looked into these ripples, seeking visions of futures unknown. The fountain seemed to hold them all, carrying fragments of countless human longings in its eternal flow. Sitting there, I felt both small and infinite, humbled by the recognition that the garden had outlived countless souls like mine, and yet, in its generosity, still allowed me to add my presence to its story. A gentle breeze lifted a strand of hair from my face, and then it came the faintest sound of chimes, delicate and crystalline, though no wind chime hung nearby. It was as if the night itself was singing. I closed my eyes and let the sound fill me, mingling with the water's song. For a moment, I wondered whether I was dreaming, whether the garden was a vision conjured by my mind. But when I opened my eyes again and saw the swan-shaped fountain, the moon overhead, and the fireflies drifting lazily nearby, I knew it was real in a way dreams can never be, because it touched not only my mind but my spirit. When I rose from the fountain and began walking again, I noticed how the path now sloped gently upward, as though guiding me toward a hidden summit within the garden. The air grew cooler, sharper, and more fragrant the higher I went, filled with a mingling of mint, roses, and something unfamiliar, perhaps night-blooming cereus, which opens its petals only when touched by darkness. My steps echoed faintly on the stones, the sound somehow deepened before, as if the earth itself listened and remembered. The moon had climbed higher into the sky, and its silver glow now bathed the entire pathway with such intensity that it felt like walking beneath a river of light. To my left, an orchard stretched out, rows of trees heavy with fruit glowing like lanterns in the night. Pears gleamed pale green, and apples wore a sheen of soft gold, their skins kissed by moonbeams. A single breeze swept through the orchard, and I swear I heard a sigh pass through the branches, as if the trees themselves exhaled in unison. I paused to rest my hand on the bark of one apple tree, its trunk solid, rough, and warm from the day's lingering sun. For a moment, I felt a pulse, faint yet steady, as though the tree's life was not so different from my own heartbeat. There was a strange comfort in that recognition, that life is everywhere, even where we seldom think to look. I picked a fallen apple from the ground, its skin cool and smooth. When I bit into it, the flavor burst across my tongue, sweet, crisp, and brimming with a freshness that no market fruit could ever carry. It was as though I had bitten directly into the essence of the night itself, distilled into form. Eating that apple filled me with energy and, more than that, with an odd sense of belonging, as though the garden had welcomed me further by offering a gift from its heart. The orchard faded behind me as the path curved once more, drawing me closer to the unknown heart of this moonlit paradise. At last, the upward slope ended, and I found myself at a high terrace where the view opened wide. Below me stretched the entire garden, bathed in silver and shadow. Each corner glowed with its own quiet magic, the pond reflecting stars, the fountain singing softly, the lavender fields stretching like rivers of purple mist. From this vantage, the moon seemed closer than ever, almost within reach, hanging over the horizon like a glowing guardian watching both the earth and the dreams of those who wandered upon it. A stone bench stood at the terrace's edge, its surface cold but welcoming, and I sat there, allowing the panorama to etch itself into my memory. The silence here was different, not the silence of absence, but of fullness, a silence that vibrated with life so profoundly that it seemed louder than any human voice. I leaned back, gazing at the stars, and wondered how many travelers before me had sat upon the same bench, asking the same unspoken questions. Who am I beneath the vastness of the sky? What do the stars see when they look down upon us? Do the garden and the moon remember us long after we are gone? The thought struck me with both humility and comfort, that perhaps nothing is ever truly lost, that perhaps every sigh, every step, every whisper is preserved in places like this, woven into the soil, branches, and breeze. My eyes wandered to the far side of the terrace, where a marble statue stood half-shrouded in ivy. It was a figure of a woman, her head bowed, her arms extended as if offering something unseen. The ivy wrapped her like a cloak, yet her face remained visible, serene and timeless. I felt a deep pull toward her, as though she was not simply a statue, but a guardian of the stories held within the garden. When the wind stirred, it almost seemed her lips moved, whispering not in words, but in emotions, patience, sorrow, hope, eternity. I closed my eyes, and for a brief, breathtaking instant, I felt as if I was part of something far larger than myself, part of the eternal song sung by earth, moon, and stars together. As I rose from the bench and descended the opposite side of the terrace, the path grew narrower, lined with hedges of wild roses. Their fragrance was richer here, mingling with the faint scent of damp stone. The petals glowed pale under the moonlight, and when I brushed against them, they left a soft trace of dew on my fingertips, as if marking me with the garden's blessing. The pathway eventually led into a grove where lantern-shaped flowers hung from the branches like living stars. Their soft golden glow bathed the grove in an otherworldly light, warmer than the moon yet just as serene. I walked slowly, marveling at the way each bloom seemed to breathe, opening and closing with the rhythm of the night wind. The grove hummed with life, not just from the flowers, but from the presence of unseen creatures stirring gently within the undergrowth. I heard the faint scuttle of paws on fallen leaves, the whisper of wings overhead, and somewhere deep within, the faint melody of a flute. My steps faltered, for I could not tell whether the sound was real or only my imagination carried away by the magic of this place. I followed it nonetheless, each note leading me deeper into the grove until I reached a small clearing at its heart. There, a circle of stones lay arranged with precision, as though marking a sacred place. The air here shimmered, and I felt my skin prickle as though brushed by invisible fingers. The flute's music grew clearer, though I could see no musician. It was haunting and tender, echoing to the clearing as though the garden itself was singing. My heart ached with the beauty of it, filling me with both longing and peace. I knelt at the circle's edge, bowing my head without quite knowing why, as though acknowledging something older, wiser, and infinitely more eternal than myself. In that moment, I understood the garden was not merely a place of plants and stones. It was a living memory, a sanctuary of spirit, where the boundary between earth and the infinite blurred. When at last the flute's melody faded, the silence returned, deep and profound, and I knew my walk was nearing its end. I rose and continued along the final stretch of the path, which now wound gently downward, guiding me back toward the garden's entrance. Yet everything looked different now, richer, more luminous, as though the journey itself had changed my vision. The same flowers I had admired earlier now seemed to glow from within, their petals whispering secrets of resilience and beauty. The same pond shimmered, not just with moonlight but with memory, carrying fragments of the unseen song within its ripples. The same fountain still sang, but now I heard it not as water falling on stone, but as time itself flowing without end. I walked slower than before, reluctant to leave, yet knowing the garden's purpose was not to hold me forever, but to awaken something within me that I could carry back into the world. As I neared the exit, the moon seemed to dip lower, casting long beams of silver light across the grass, as if blessing my departure. I paused at the threshold, turning for one last look. The fireflies still danced in the distance, the roses still leaned toward the path, and the willow still wept its graceful branches into the pond. Yet beneath their beauty, I felt a deeper truth, that every night the garden renewed itself, not only for those who wandered through it, but for the universe itself. It was a reminder that beauty, mystery, and peace exist not just in extraordinary places, but in the quiet moments when one chooses to walk slowly, to listen, to breathe. With a final breath of jasmine and lavender, I stepped out beneath the vast night sky. Though I had left the garden behind, I carried it within me, its moonlit serenity, its whispers, its eternal song. And as I walked away, I realized the journey had never truly been about the garden itself. It had been about learning to see the world with new eyes, to recognize that every shadow carries light, every silence holds music, and every step, however small, can become a walk to the moonlit garden of the soul.